forgot to record there. But anyways, the asset management portion, go ahead and check that out, especially if you're a ScalePad user. There's some added features in there for additional fields. If you need any help with asset management, let us know. It's an important aspect for those of you who want to be able to tie assets to your recommendations, which is the theme for this week is how in your infrastructure audits for first quarter are you going to handle recommendations. This is really important that you present well. You can sell a firewall all day long and your client won't care. But when you make a recommendation, it's not to buy a new firewall, it's to solve a problem. And that's always the way you do recommendations, never any other way. So the problem may be that a future problem is going to occur, or there's going to be a business disruption, or that there's something going on that you need to worry about, or that your client needs to worry about, and you're going to get ahead of this issue, or you're solving an existing issue, or you're solving an issue you saw in the past.
Yeah, so, and let me talk about this from kind of the other perspective. So I worked with MSP for a while, and sometimes it becomes the what was it? The cobbler's kids' shoes are always the worst.
The cobbler's children have no shoes.
Yeah, that's and we actually had a very good infrastructure. It wasn't bad, but we had this one server. Okay. And so this is, I don't know, many years ago. I'm getting old. I lose track of time now. But it was an HP G6 and it was old then, right? And it was sitting in the server, and we're doing all these audits, and I'm running a bunch of this stuff through. We're getting a real formalized life cycle management program going. And this server keeps popping up, and we make jokes about it because it is the oldest server in the monitoring system, just on and on. And we talked about it in our executive meetings, and we're all a bunch of techie guys. And so we look at that and go, we got to get that server replaced. We should replace that server. We should replace that server. And, HP didn't do us any favors because I didn't know this at the time, but I learned that HP will sell you a care pack on anything for as long as you're willing to buy it. They don't care how old it is. Interesting deal. But anyway, so this box just goes on and on and on. And I'm being the VCIO. So I'm trying to drive this conversation. And ultimately, we narrowed it down what this box did. It had one purpose. It was important, but not super critical in the way that it could be handled. Anyway, at the end of the day, we couldn't come up with a good business reason to replace that server. So you know what I quit doing? I quit talking about replacing the server. I didn't have a strong business case, so I moved on. And that's what we need to do. There may be things in your client's environment that you would love to replace, but if we don't have a business case for it, your efforts are going to be far, far better spent on tackling those things that we can build business cases for.
Now, I want to go on the opposite direction.
Yes.
And by saying that there are assets that don't get the love they need because they fall off the radar. Now, case in point, once upon a time, Adam Walter worked for an organization. We'll say it was a large business. And they did lots and lots of business. And they had really complex financials, and they had thousands and thousands of assets in their inventory, PCs, just PCs alone. But when it comes to like actual assets, hundreds of thousands, entire asset management team. So there was things everywhere. And we got a call about a certain business unit that couldn't function. We couldn't figure out why. So we were like, okay, well, let's figure out what they're doing. And so they were doing this financial analysis on some of their investment portfolios. And we went in, and turned out it was a DB4 object. Mm-hmm. And we could not find the server. And this no one knew what this thing was. I mean, we had to go into routing tables to figure out where this thing was. It turns out it was an old compact server, one of those big old like mini fridge ones.
Yeah.
Been in a server room back in the 90s, and it just never got moved because it wasn't in the asset inventory.
Yeah.
And so it stayed back there, and we found it finally. it was in that room that, with all the equipment where like you find the old 56 US robotics modems,
Mhm.
and like you shove everything back there, but it was still plugged in with a Cat 5 cable in the back. Now, how did this get missed in asset inventories? I don't know. Probably it's because there were so many assets. They just assumed it was an IP. We need to research what that IP is someday.
It was probably running Novell.
But this was a very important piece of software that was accessing a DB4 file on this server via a share. And all they knew in this department was they clicked on this icon on their desktop, and they got access to these spreadsheets, this data. And like, how do we migrate this data over? I'm like,
Yeah.
can anybody on here tell me how to migrate from DB4 to SQL? Yeah, you hire some people to do some very expensive programming. So the point is that instead of migrating business processes, we were migrating assets. And we overlooked some integral things. So somebody had said, "Hey, in your business unit, what are some of the critical functionalities the roles of your business unit provide?" And then they would say, "Well, we do this and this and this and this." And like, well, where is that thing? What servers, what assets support these functionalities? So a recommendation should have been made years ago, like decades ago, was that we need to migrate off of DB4 into Oracle or SQL, which were the two preferred databases that they had there. And had they done it back then, the migration would have been fairly simple because they were already migrating a bunch of other things and they had the developers on staff to do it. Here it was 15 years post boom, post.com or 10 years post.com, and we're sitting there trying to figure out what is even this DB4? A couple of the guys were like, "What is that?" Like, well, and that was where we were. Like, the reason it escalated to me as an engineer was none of the help desk people knew what it was. They could not figure out any of this. They couldn't figure out where it was, why it was going down, how to make this link work, and I eventually figured it out. But the point of this story is that just like Skip talks about, like, don't sell the server. I'm saying go from the other end, say, look at the business unit and say, what devices are out there that are mission critical? And make sure you identify those in a company.
Yeah.
Critical assets. Because then when you make recommendations, you're not making recommendations of the assets themselves. You're making recommendations of the business workflows. So somebody had said, "Oh yeah, this is our investment portfolio. This is how we track how much money we're making on X, Y, and Z for retirement accounts or assets within the company." And so we've got to figure that stuff out so that we can make recommendations on business workflows and things we're going to upgrade. Hey, we're going to upgrade that asset management software or asset management suite. What's it going to cost? It's going to cost around $30,000. Now, when you say it in that context, it's the asset management suite you're upgrading. They're like, "Oh, $30,000? Well, that thing manages $2 million for our business a year."
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer now.
Yep.
And so when you're upgrading a firewall, they're like, "It's a firewall. I mean, what's the big deal?" No, this thing allows for your clients to communicate with you on a daily basis. If that thing goes down, your salespeople cannot communicate, cannot make deals. And so you need to be able to say what workflows are affecting which assets. So when you make a recommendation, you tie the assets in there, but you don't make them the primary target. So to illustrate this, I'm gonna flip over to make sure I'm not in the test environment. Been in the test environment all day today for some reason. Every time I do a demo. So what we're gonna have here is we've got like the assets over here. So for those of you who haven't done the asset upload, let's do one just really. Let's go to essentials, so then I don't have to upload one. So if I go over to the clients here and I head into Joe's Trucks, I can go over to assets, and I've got a couple already here, kind of our demo. So those of you who want to upload more, you come over here and you can just choose your file. It can be a CSV, and you grab it and push it up. The feature we just updated today or earlier this week that went live allows you to look at your asset and see any extra fields that are not in the original columns over here will be listed down here. So if you want to see like, who was, last logged on, or whose memory needs to be upgraded, things like that. So details about the device. But what you want to do is you want to take these assets that you want to upgrade. You're not going to sell them on a new network or a new printer or a new workstation. You're going to tie it to the quoting system. Done. That is now tied to the recommendation on the dashboard or in the assessment here. So we come over here, and we've got the quoting system here, and it is tied to this. Now, you don't see the assets that are being updated. This is all project revenue. We've considered, like at the bottom here, like having a list of assets affected. That's in your quote. That's in your extraneous detail on another page. But when it comes to like, hey, this is what we need to do here. We know it's going to cost like $10,000. How do you want us to go ahead and make the quoting system more reliable? And you're like, oh yeah, well, what's that going to cost? Then you get into your quotes and you can send them, but you want to sell them on what they want done first. And then you can talk price later. Standard sales mechanics. So over here, you can have your proposal, and you can say, here's the warehouse upgrade. I did all this right. You can see that there are certain things tied to it that is driving the price. Anything to add here, Skip?
Yeah, so once you drill into those projects, if you're within the report or the project roadmap, we can see those additional details. And this asset module is not the end-all, be-all asset module. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel there. Where this comes in really, really helpful is focusing on these projects. All right, if we've got something, again, that we're having a business conversation with the client, we've established a goal, and we need some supporting details. We want to make sure we're capturing the important elements, and we've identified these assets here are critical to this project, getting this thing done for our clients. And so that really helps us bring it all together, and that way we don't have to open up a bunch of other spreadsheets and slice and dice a million different ways. This helps us stay on task. And again, scroll up to the top, Adam. What do we call this one again? We've used this one. All right, so making the quoting system more reliable. How are we going to do it? We're going to do some things, and here's the assets involved in making the quoting system more reliable.
Yeah, so we sound a bit like a broken record here. So some of you who've been on the calls for a while have heard us say this many times. Rename the stupid title of your project. Can't make it any clearer than this here, people. We've talked about this for almost 4 weeks in a row. Rename this thing. I think we brought it up in every single call on infrastructure. But when it comes to tying your assets here, we're not talking about these. Just like we talked about in the beginning of this conversation. Don't sell the server. And also look at critical business processes. You might find a critical business process where all the assets tied to it are under warranty. And you might be able to sell them $30,000 to $40,000 of projects today because they don't ever want those servers, those assets to go out of warranty or be not covered or there to be any kind of gap. They want this to be super solid because this is the most critical part of the business. So I worked for another company for a while, and they were a bank marketing firm. And let me tell you how stressed they were when their SQL server would go down, because that every second that server was down was seconds it was not churning out data which they sold to banks. And so we would constantly upgrade that whenever we had a chance. So there was never, if we could get it to process faster, that was money in my back pocket. When I started creating virtual machines where they could run their SQL queries via virtual machine, close their laptop, go home, pop back up, and still see the SQL query running on their virtual instance, they thought that was the best thing ever. And that is something where I could say, hey, I have an opportunity this weekend to upgrade the VM cluster for those SQL servers. Would you like me to go ahead and get that order in and get that upgraded? I know it's not due to be replaced for another year, but this weekend, I know that we have an opportunity because the power will be out to the building. Or because everybody's going to be out at the conference. If I do it this weekend, then you won't miss a step. And so you can take a recommendation that has some serious assets on it, knowing that this is the most important thing to your client, and you can sell them today because what you're doing is you're helping their business succeed.
Yeah, and so another example to just kind of track these, I have experience in a government environment, and so we really did. We had fortunate we had the money in our budget, and we had warranty on everything. That was all fine and well. But the third floor of one of our buildings housed our 911 center, and all the teams that made that run and kept that running on a day-to-day basis. And if I wanted to go in, and this is many years ago, didn't have this tool, but if I wanted to go in and say, hey, yeah, we've got the next business day warranty on everything, but for everything on the third floor in Municipal Plaza, we want to get the 4-hour response. All right, so that would be a project. We'd get that on the roadmap. Why is it? We want to make sure the 911 center is up and running, high availability. And we go in there and then we tag the assets that are specifically for just the third floor. We put those in here, and again, when we go and we ask, the board or city council for money, we're not saying, hey, we want to, increase the SLA in our warranty response system. No, that wasn't it. It's, hey, we want to make sure the 911 center is up and running. It's a whole lot easier to get money for that than it is to, modify the terms of a warranty agreement.
Yeah, and that's how you get the buy-in. And it's in the community email, I mentioned that you're doing it completely. It's often done completely wrong. I've been on the other side of the table. I have sat in meetings where this vendor or a MSP is trying so hard to sell this really great firewall, and the MSP knows that it's the best firewall on the market. And I'm sitting there looking at them. I'm like, why would I give you $150,000 for this firewall? Now, I'm an engineer and I understand what this firewall is going to do, but I don't get how I'm going to convince my CFO to okay this. And so we sit down and I have to translate as a CIO and think, okay, so I know what this firewall is doing. How is this going to help us meet our goals as a company? And so, being the incumbent guy on the other side of the table, I'm sitting there like digesting the technical information of this asset and translating it into my CFO's business knowledge, so I can say, hey, we're going to spend $150,000 on this firewall for mid-tier. Yeah, yes, I used to be a corporate IT guy, so yes, $150,000 firewall was a normative thing for me. It wasn't the one; it was 10 of them I bought. Anyways, it's looking at like, hey, this is going to help us increase our level of compliance so that we can get those larger contracts. Like, you wanted me to solve the problem with data segmentation at the mid-tier level in the middle of our data center, so we can guarantee that no one's hacking us, or at least have a high level of visibility. This is how I'm going to get there. And if we do this, I will be able to look the auditors in the eye and say, yes, we monitor all traffic coming in and out of this zone. And the CFO goes, oh, well, $150,000 is worth it because that is a $30 million contract. So that's where I am able to translate. But your customers don't have this person. They don't have somebody to translate. You have to be that person because they're too small. They can't afford a $200,000 CIO to come in and translate for them. You have to do it. And so when you come in, you need to talk to them like, hey, tell us about your business. Do a SWOT analysis. Ask them what's going well. Ask them about their goals, and have them explain to you their business strategy so that you can then say, oh my gosh, well, it sounds like the SQL servers are a big deal here. I'm going to not worry about desktops today. What I really want to focus is on Cheryl's laptop that's running an i3. They need to be running an i7 because they're one of your devs, and we need to upgrade your VM cluster so they have a better access to the SQL queries can run faster. Now you can say that in your head because you know what the highest priority of this company is. And often enough, I sit there on the other side of the table and I watch them try to explain, like, oh, you need to buy a faster laptop. Well, how much is that faster laptop going to cost? Well, it's going to cost about $3,000. I don't want to buy that.
Yeah.
Just give me the low end one, which is how Cheryl ended up with an i3 processor as a SQL admin. So what you want to do is understand the business processes that you're going into. You don't have to know at high level. And Skip and I talk about this in a podcast all the time, is that your client is the expert in their business. Learn from them so you can connect the dots for them and make better recommendations. Because what seems important to you may not be important to them. And if you both work together, you'll find recommendations that solve two problems. One, you want to sell more and you want to have a more stable environment so you don't have to go on so many calls to this client. Your client wants to make more money. There are overlaps on those two goals. Remember, a lot of MSPs want to decrease the amount of operational cost to a client. So you want to get rid of old assets that are costing you time. Your client wants to make more money. There is overlap, but you have to look for it. Your incentives are a little bit different. But if you make the priorities of your client your priorities, those overlaps will become more apparent. So SQL Server that's getting a little old versus a laptop that is ancient, the SQL Server is what they're going to want to buy because they know it's supporting their critical business infrastructure.
And that's just it. Some of this stuff is really, really complex. And, I'm looking over, a lot of the guys on our call today, I know you guys are the techie guys and you know all the details and you understand the complexities that go into that. And we got to be careful that we don't try to start educating our clients and trying to teach them everything that we know and all the reasons that go into this. Sometimes, our clients are just going to have to trust us. It's a great place to be. And when our clients feel that we're pushing towards their goals, then they are going to trust us. So if you're talking about what's important to the client, they're a lot more, bought into the process. And once you get to that level, then you don't have to explain them every little detail. You don't have to convince them why the technical merit of this path versus the optional path is the better one to take, because you're not talking about that at all. So staying up in that conversation, it's a process for us. I know many times a lot of us, and I speak from experience here, and I again, looking at some of you guys, I kind of think you went along the same path. You got into some of the C-level conversations because you were really good at taking technical elements and explaining it in terms that they understand. That's a valuable skill set. I don't want to minimize that, but that's not the driving skill set that we need to be using. All right, taking technology and explaining it to C-levels is not it. I know it sounds great, but that's not really what we need to do. We need the C-levels to explain to us what they're trying to do, not the other way around.
And so when you take that approach to your recommendations, a couple things are going to happen. We've listed these out in the email. When you have that context, you're going to attract decision makers into this room because they know that you're discussing business assets or you're discussing business processes. And that is going to push and increase your customer buy-in. So not only are you going to get better people in your meetings, you're going to speed up the process by doing so. And this is all through talking through business processes and how you're going to improve them through technology. So you're going to be, by having the right people in the room, because you're having the right conversations, you're going to decrease that time to decision because the people who need to okay the check to write you are sitting in front of you. They might say, hey, you know what, let's expect a team meeting and I'll have an answer by you next week. You're going to increase customer buy-in because, once again, the stakeholders are in your meetings because they're the ones helping you make the decision. They're on board. They're an advocate now because they were explaining to you why this business process is so important. And then you're saying back to them, hey, in order to stabilize that business function, here's what we need to do. It's going to cost $10,000. It's going to cost $1,000. And it might cost just service. We just got to come in and tune this up. You're not operating with best practices. It's going to $3,000 of engineer time and we got you fixed. And then when you finish that, take good notes in the dashboard to explain why this is important, so that next time you need to upgrade this thing, you have notes on it, or at least put it in your PSA so that this asset has good notes on. Like, do not forget, this is a critical asset. We need to make sure this thing is up to date. Maybe decrease the amount of time you have on it's under warranty. So maybe it's a 2-year swap out on this thing because it's so critical. So when you ask those right questions, when you ask about what business processes are critical, and then tie assets to those business products or processes, we call those critical assets, and those become easy recommendations. So instead of pitching a new firewall, instead of going into my, oops, I stopped sharing my screen. Let's do it this way. Instead of pitching the new firewall, instead of pitching instead of pitching a new server, I am pitching a quoting system. I'm pitching warehouse monitoring. I am pitching ways to speed up wireless, anything like that. Those are things that a customer will buy in on. Oh my gosh, you're gonna make wireless sync easier? Yes. Oh gosh, whatever I can do to have that done. $3,500, done, yep. Done. I can approve that. And so that's recommendations your customer will buy in every time. And then knowing this can help them in their customer journey and get them a little bit higher score, fantastic. That's just gravy on top. But again, like we're talking about off to the side here, that's not to everyone, it's just to the panelists. Having stakeholder interviews that add this context is great. If you haven't had stakeholder interviews, make sure people know when you come into this QBR or into this meeting that you're going to be discussing how to make business processes more efficient or how to improve lines of business. And you want to learn from them so that you can categorize assets in context of business, not in context of network.
Yep.
Because it is so easy, as I said early on in the conversation, it is so easy for MSPs to get caught up in break fix because you want to reduce the amount of downtime for the client, which is a noble thing. But the helping them improve their lines of business will sell projects.
Yeah. Now, looking at our attendee list, I think, Adam, a little bit of this is preaching to the choir. But let me offer the test, and you guys might have heard me talk about this before, especially if you've got multiple account managers in your team. Client, Adam, if you'll go get back to client, and then click on clients again, up there at the top. We wanted the master client button, and then the bottom one there, the score compare. So in your organization, bring up your managed services platform portal, navigate to this list right here. All right, and this is going to show you all the projects that are on all the roadmaps across all your clients. All right, look down this list. All right, what shows up? We've got it filtered there. So if you want to see how your team is doing, all right, and to see if they're actually getting on board with this, you can see what the servers have, what the projects have been renamed to in that list. And we've got that, it must be the demo one we're getting some funny stuff on. But as they change the names, you will see the ones that show up. And if you're seeing things like implement MDM solution, right? Your customers don't know what MDM means, okay? So that's no, I took it to the wrong spot. I did. I took it to the wrong spot. There's the project. Yeah, there we go. So now we can see that, we have begun renaming these projects. And so this is a good test. If you want to see how your organization is doing, run through this. And if all you see is the generic templated names, then you probably need to have some more conversations. But if you see lots of things pop up, like, change the quoting system, keep track of the iPads, whatever it is, then you know that people are beginning to align the business solutions with the technology solutions.
Yeah, so you look over here and you see, if you filter by recommendations, it's a great way just to filter it down. Just, hey, what is being recommended to the client right now? That's your little happy little idea ball here. You can make sure that as a VCIO or as an account manager that these are renamed. You should be renaming these. If they're not, if they're still saying risk assessment here, this needs to be renamed. This needs to be renamed. That's okay. But this at least tells you where are you missing out on. So these are all Joe's trucks here. Obviously, this is our demo account. And I need to go through and rename all these. And I have to go back into the report and go through and rename them, or go into my project listing and do it. So this is just an overview that you can do with your teams on a Monday or over a pot of coffee, and talk about what recommendations you're having, how you're going to buy into them, and then like criticize your teams who are going to be presenting this, and like, so tell me how this is going to help the business. And then, you know, if you get a blank stare from your account manager or VCIO, challenge them, teach them, use that teachable moment, and then move on to the next one. Fleet management. Oh, great. Somebody renamed this one. Fantastic. Tell me about this project.
Yep.
And so that people can walk into the project with a recommendation that they understand. And maybe you know this client, say, hey, you know what? That fleet management, that's super important. They're a trucking company. Make sure you emphasize that this fleet management is very important to them. Emphasize how the upgrade is going to go smoothly, how we're going to plan this for a time in which it's going to work well for them. And so this recommendation will go great. And then while you're before the meeting, say, hey, whoever's in charge of fleet management, make sure they're in the room so we can discuss with them, hey, anything not going well with fleet management that we need to be aware of, that we can help. Like, well, I can't work from home. Like, oh, let's work on that. Let's figure out why.
Yeah.
And so when you're asking these questions and you're making these recommendations in the meeting, you can go ahead of time and say, get the right people in the room for the recommendation so that you can move forward easily.
And now, one thing to comment on just the tool itself, when you're in there, that name of the project that really is just free text. We can put anything we want in there. Certainly in that view, it's not going to be seen anywhere else across your other customers. And you don't need to come up with some sort of standardized naming convention or prefixes to go on that. Don't worry about that, because if you want to slice and dice that list, you can still go and see what template that was made from. So if you want to go out there and say all of our server projects, I want to see how we are running on all of our server projects, you can filter that list by the template that it came from, and then you can see what they were all named of. And then we're going to have, speed up the quoting system, make the inventory real, whatever pops into those fields for a business case is not necessarily going to make the wheels come off on your side as you try to manage things on the back end.
Yep. And I think that's great. And I want everybody to know, like, not your clients aren't engineers. They're business people. Work with them. And, we've got people messaging in chat over here talking about how they've had success and how you can make projects relatable to your client. And it's all about that relatability. We ran an entire podcast series, I think last fall or 2 falls ago, on relatability in IT. You've got to find common ground with that client, otherwise they're not going to buy in. No one wants to buy something that's not going to make their life better. Unless you're a really good salesperson. If you're a really good salesperson, you can get somebody to buy, a cup of sand in the desert. But selling that cup of water is going to be a much easier sell, and you're going to make more off of it.
There you go.
Knowing what your client wants and understanding what they're after and being able to connect the dots for them from the technical side, that's where your recommendations are. That's how you use the IT dashboard, and that's how you're going to nail clients who in the past have been very reluctant or have been sitting on projects for months, and now they're going to say, oh, that solves that problem? I can work from home if we do that? Yes. Oh, let's do it. Why didn't we get that done months ago? Well, I told you. No, you told me a firewall or something a few months ago, and we didn't have any money for it. I have plenty of money for working from home strategies. So, all right. Well, thanks for coming on today, Skip. I want everybody to remember, it's all about relatability so that you can get the right people in the room so that you can make recommendations based upon business processes, not on technology assets.
There we go.
See everyone next week. What is next week? I think we're moving into March officially.
Yes.
Planning Q2 activities. So we're in March. We're gonna work through how to plan quarter 2 already. Whew, this year is getting away from us. So you should have almost finished up all your infrastructure audits by now and be moving into service audits. Getting ready for that. And we're going to talk about quoting. We're going to talk about activity levels and all sorts of things next month. So next week is meet with customers to plan Q2 activities, and we'll show you how to get that done so you can get increased buy-in. We'll see everybody later.